There we go. Oh, there we are. Okay, thanks. So, hello everyone. Those who stuck around after the interesting talk, now we're on to the tedious, boring talk. Um, but it's an important talk, and so I hope you'll stay around for it, of why you need a loan agreement if you are an origami artist, or even if you're a hobbyist. But at some point, you're going to exhibit your work, and you should have a loan agreement. And what is a loan agreement is it's a contract. And I know you're thinking, oh, contracts, you're spoiling the fun of origami. And it has nothing to do with drinking beer, OAS folks, I'm sorry. But it is a contract and it's often important. And you may not need it because professional art museums typically have their own, and they'll send it to you and say, sign this, and so forth. So you might be asking, why do you need one? And the best answer is something I heard not too long ago, which is when you're working on something, you need to be super clear about what you're going to do, from that great origami artist Adrian Sack about 5 minutes ago. And why is that? It's because even if they give you an agreement, the agreement might not cover important things. But they also, they might not have one. They might not send you one. And that can be for various reasons. It's because they say, oh, we can do this informally. We'll just talk about what we want and do a handshake. It might be because they don't think of origami as art. You know, I'm not asking you for art. I'm just asking you for some models. Or that might be because, well, we're a small museum, or we're not even a museum. We're a store. We want a display. We're a center. We just want some things in a window and so forth. And all those are actually reasons why you should have an agreement. And there's two reasons for an agreement, and one is sort of the obvious one. It's a document, a common document, that spells out the obligations of both sides, what you're going to do for them, what they're going to do for you. But it is also, it's a checklist of things that are important that you might not have thought about. And so even if you're not going to send an agreement, you should look at it at one, and because there's a lot of issues that you might not have thought about. And that's what I want to go through here, and I'm going to give you a solution at the end. But what are the things that go into an agreement? So, of course, the first is the exhibition, the date, the time, the place. It should have the list of artworks you're going to include. You should have an explicit list, not just, I'll give you a bunch of origami, but all of the pieces, spelling out the title of the work and what's on the label. You know, are they even, some places might not even put a label. No, you need a label, and it should have the title, typically. The title, the year, the medium. You might want a statement about the work, but if you want those things, it should be in the agreement. And the dates. And wait, bullet number one is date. Didn't I just say that? So what do I mean by dates? Well, there's many dates in the process, because the whole process starts when the work leaves your house or wherever your storeroom. There's the date when it's picked up by a shipping company or it's shipped out. There's the dates when it must be delivered to the venue. They might say, I need it a week before the exhibit, but no sooner than 2 weeks before the exhibit, because they're going to have to store it until they set it up. The dates at which it's going to be set up, and then the exhibition start date, end date, and then everything back in reverse. And so there's two periods of time that are important. There's the exhibition period, but what's more important to you is the loan period, the period of time that your work is out of your hands and unavailable for anything else. And in order to talk about the loan period, which is this whole time, need to talk about those dates. And we need to agree on, you don't have to ship it before such and such a date, but you must ship it by such and such a date, and they have to get it back to you by such and such a date, so you can plan to use it for whatever the next thing is. And then the next issue is the really important one, and you may not think it's important until you get your models back and the entire exhibition of 50 works has been stuffed into a shoebox with rocks as padding. And that is loss and damage. I mean, we work in a medium that is inherently very, very fragile. And so damage is a serious concern. I've had works come back from exhibitions damaged. I have lots of friends who have had the same thing. And so loss and damage the concern starts the moment it leaves your place, and it doesn't end until it comes back. It includes damage that happens in transit, damage that happens when they're setting it up or taking it down from the show, and damage that happens during the show because they left it out on a table and some audience member said, "Ooh, does this bend?" "Oh, yes, it does." In the professional art world, it is common for the venue to provide what's called door-to-door insurance. They insure it from the moment it leaves your place to the moment it arrives. And so that's a reasonable thing to ask for, but it should be spelled out in an agreement. You may know that shippers, UPS and Federal Express and DHL, have insurance policies, but usually they are very limited in what they will cover, and they're pretty sticky about reimbursement. They may only reimburse for the materials, not for the full value of the artwork. But the professional policy, door-to-door insurance, will cover the whole thing. And so that's why that should be in an agreement. And then there's the cost of shipping. Who pays? A lot of places, or some places, especially the informal ones, will ask you to pay for shipping. But no, if they're putting on the show, they should pay for shipping both ways. What about crating? If it's a big show, things need to be in shipping crates. And so that's another question. Again, that should be in the agreement. Who pays for it? And of course, I ask for the venue. But you can work that out, but it should be in the agreement. There's setup and takedown. Do you set it up? Are you going out to the venue and set it up, or will they? Very often they say, no, we'll set it up. But then there's also the question of takedown, when they take the exhibit out of the display and put it back in the boxes for shipping back to you. That's something you might want to worry about if they're going to do it. Very often they do, because will they repack it with the same care that you packed it to go out? And then if something happens, it's damaged, what happens? Whose fault is it? Is it the shipper's fault? Did it happen at setup? Did it happen during the show, or takedown or shipping back? And all those questions may affect whether someone is responsible for paying for it, or who's responsible. And because there's all these different places where damage can happen, there's really only one way to settle that question, and that's a thing called a condition report. And I didn't know what condition reports were, but that's a very common practice in professional art exhibits. And it's something I think origami people should know about and ask for. And what that means is you document the state of your work before it goes out. You take pictures. And then they document it when they receive it. As they open the box, they take a picture. And when it goes on display, and then they do the same thing when it's packed up, and you do the same thing when it returns. And that's in the contract, that you must document. And the reason for doing that, it seems like a lot of work, and again, it's more tedious, but if the piece is damaged somewhere, that tells you where it happened, and they're often who's responsible for replacing it. This is especially important if you contribute to a traveling exhibition, because it is going to get packed up and taken down and shipped and packed up and taken down and shipped over and over, and without condition reports, it's almost guaranteed the origami is going to come back and it's going to be crumpled like mess, but the condition report is going to tell if it's ruined, who did it and who's responsible for it, if that was documented, that this would be done in the contract. Another important issue is the question of sales. Is the artwork for sale? If it is for sale, does the venue get a percentage? Typically, the answer is yes. Now, very often a venue that offers for sale will have their own agreement, because they're stipulating we get 40% or 30% or some percent of any sales. And so that's already going to be in an agreement. But it's important to address even if there's no sales, that it's documented in the contract that there are no sales. Because you don't want the situation where they sell your work out from under you if you didn't intend it. And this, I have had acquaintances whom this has happened to. So it should be in your loan agreement. And then the next issue is there a loan fee? And sadly, most origami people are unfamiliar with this as a concept because we're so used to people saying, to doing it for free. Will you send me some models? Sure, I'll send you some models. And we do that with our friends, with our societies. We contribute our work for free because it's our way of paying back to the community. But when you get out into the professional art world, it's a reasonable ask. And if you're trying to make a living from origami, the loan fee is a part of your income. You should ask for it. And then even if they say, no, we can't afford it, then you can decide whether you want to participate in the exhibition or not. And maybe you do. Maybe you say, the exposure is worth it. I'll participate for free. But you can ask, and it should be something that's addressed up front and then worked into your agreement so that there's no surprises at the end. Another important factor is curation. Again, just to be spelled out, who decides what pieces are displayed, whether they are displayed, how they are displayed. Sometimes, and very often that's the curator at the venue. That's common. But you should understand that if you've given curation duty over to the venue, then if they decide to put your models together with someone else's in the same case right next to each other, that really is their decision. So you can't complain about it. Conversely, if you are the curator, then you have a lot of work to do in designing and specifying. So it can go either way, but you should spell out which way it goes in your agreement. Copyright and publicity are important issues. Copyright, it's your artwork, you own the copyright on the artwork, but the museum needs to advertise the show. They need to show pictures. So you need to license their copyright. You need to explicitly give them permission to use pictures for publicity and so forth. But you can also stipulate that they include credit, that when they show the piece in their brochure, that they will explicitly include the title and the artist. So it's not just anonymous artwork, that the artist's credit goes along with it. So that too should be spelled out in the exhibit. Conversely, they will ask you to warrant that you own the copyright on your work. And usually we do, so that's an easy thing to say yes, but it's protection that they like and that you should give them. You want to stipulate mounting, care, and protection. Things like, for display, do the works need to be displayed under glass? And that's something I very often ask for, particularly if an exhibit is general public and there are not docents present at all time. Because, as I think many of us know to our sorrow, people love to handle origami. And even if they see a painting on a wall or a sculpture on the pedestal that they wouldn't dream of touching, but origami, it feels so friendly and informal. I just have to see if it's real, and they handle it, and oops, and then they put a finger through a panel or something like that. So you can stipulate that, and once again, it should be spelled out in the agreement. You should find out and stipulate, are there docents overseeing the work during exhibit hours? That's a reason. That's an alternative to having things under glass. You can have things, it's much nicer to have things exposed in the open, but if you've got someone standing in the corner of the room looking, people are much more reluctant to handle things that they shouldn't. What about handling during setup and takedown? And it's common to request, and I recommend people do, that all handling be done with gloves, either cotton gloves or what's now probably more common is nitrile gloves, the thin disposable gloves. But that ensures that people aren't getting dirt and oils onto the work. Lighting, there should be no direct sun, no UV lights, and that's pretty common in museum setting. But again, it should be in the agreement, because if it's not, whether it's there should be in the agreement, because there are some venues that won't sign up to that. Some of you may have participated in the Hangar 7 exhibition. It was about 10 years ago, and that was basically inside a greenhouse, and everything was exposed to full sun for 3 months. But we knew it because it was in the agreement, and we knew that no matter what color we shipped to the exhibition, it would come back beige. And it did. There should be humidity control, because origami changes shape in humidity. I had works that I was building that were displayed in a greenhouse, and the high humidity, just everything melted. So once again, stipulate that, and if the venue pushes back, they might say, no, we're going to show our work in a greenhouse, and then you get to decide, okay, I will only ship pieces that can handle that sort of work. And what about pieces that aren't on display, that they should be stored in a climate-controlled way, and the like. There are usually clauses for termination. What happens if something goes wrong? The exhibit is canceled. Their air conditioning breaks and it was slated for July, so they're not going to do the show. How do you unwind it? They will have to ship your work back. They're going to pay for it. If there was a loan fee, is there a partial payment because of the initial work? Whatever that is, it should be covered in your agreement. And then any agreement's going to have a bunch of legalese, things that start with, like, this agreement encompasses blah, 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 blah. And those things should be in there. No one really pays attention to them because they're there to cover very unlikely circumstances, but it's useful to have those. It ties up all the loose ends of what might happen. Now, so I've gone through all these things. I say they should be in there, and I can imagine many of you are thinking, oh, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to think about this. I don't need this. I don't want a bunch of complication. I'm just going to put a bunch of models on display, and or the venue. I don't need to think about it because the venue is going to have their own agreement, and especially I don't want to hire a lawyer because lawyers are expensive. But there's one really good reason to have a loan agreement. It comes from the tale of the green M&Ms, and some of you may have heard this because it's gotten apocryphal. The band Guns N' Roses, when they first started touring, they sent out their contract, and one of the stipulations of their contract was that in the waiting room of in their hotel, there must be a bowl of M&Ms with all the green ones picked out. And you think, oh, golly, that's incredibly arrogant, demanding band. What they said was the reason they did that was that they had humongous requirements for safety and electricity and hookups and sound. And if they got to their hotel room and it wasn't there, it meant the people hadn't read their contract very thoroughly. And so even if they fell down on that unimportant item, it meant they probably had fallen down on the important items. And so the reason we should have a loan agreement is not to have a document in case that there's a dispute we need to settle and point to the terms of the document and say, here's what the document is. But it's really to ensure that prior to that document, there's a meeting of the minds, that you and the venue are in agreement on all of the possible issues that could happen. And in that case, there won't be a dispute, and everything will go swimmingly, and you'll both be really happy with the outcome. Many of those things I raised could go either way. You could decide, I will do setup, they will do setup, there will be a fee, there won't be a fee, so you need to be flexible, but you should have kind of the list of items to go in. And so, next question, where do you start with that? And we'll start with a template, or as I say, I talk to lawyers so you don't have to. Now, actually, I recommend that you do, but you don't have to. I have a 6-page draft agreement that I've used in a bunch of shows. It sort of has evolved over time, informed by both good and bad experiences. It has been reviewed by an artist's lawyer. Then it addresses all these terms. I've used it in a bunch of shows, and I'm happy to share it with anyone. Just make sure you erase my name and put your name in. But you're also, welcome to change other terms. The usual legal caveats, because I have talked to lawyers. My lawyer is not your lawyer. And so you can use this as a starting point. You could have your own lawyer go over it, or you could you decide to use it as is, but then you're being your own lawyer. But even if you don't use that document, use it or something like it as a checklist, just to say, in my relationship with the art venue, have we talked about all the things that could be uncertain, that could be important? And if you have, then you'll have a very successful exhibition, and you'll both end up very happy. And that's all. Yes? Well, in the cases I have, so ever since I've put in clauses about damage and condition reports and shipping, I've never had a piece come back damaged. The damage has only happened further in the past where the arrangements were not clearly spelled out. See, one of the things is people in their own mind, if they know that there's this agreement, they're a lot more careful. They're not gonna. They'll worry, and we want them to worry because we worry. Oh, the medium is what it is made from. So for painting, it might be watercolor, oil on canvas, and for origami, medium is typically one uncut square of paper, or a laser scored irregular polygon, or something like that. Yeah.
One thing I don't think you mentioned is the value of the works part of such a loan agreement as well?
Oh yeah. Typically in your and I there's this, I always attach, I guess I should have put a slide in for that. I always, in the listing of items, um, you'll list the item, you'll list its insurance value, and you'll list a sale price or not for sale if it's not for sale. And in my listing, I will also list the dimensions of the shipping box and the dimensions of the and format of the display. So a pedestal with a vitrine 12 by 12 by 18 inches, or wall hanging or freestanding, things like that. But yeah, that is part of the schedule of items in the exhibit that's an attachment. Yeah.
You come up with a value for a replacement value.
I use because I've sold a lot of pieces, I put my insurance value as the wholesale price of a piece. If I'm selling it through a gallery that takes a commission, the insurance value is the price I would get.
And that's just having sold
Yeah, yeah, and in a lot of cases, places will say that in order to, you have to support your pricing typically by showing sales of similar pieces. So the next question you say is, well, what if you haven't sold any pieces? I don't know how you support it, but you should still pick your value and put it down. Again, that might be sticky for you if a piece comes back damaged, but if the person knows this thing has a $1,000 price on it, they're going to be real careful and they're not going to damage it.
Has your insistence of a loan agreement ever been a deal breaker?
I don't think so. It's come pretty close once or twice when a venue wanted, when I got asked at short notice, because they really wanted me to just throw some things in a box. But even that, and I'm not going to embarrass someone by saying where it was, but I think even that one eventually ended up. So no, I don't think it's ever been a deal breaker.
Has it worked the other way when you backed out because they said they would?
No, we've always been able to reach agreement. There have been cases where they sent me their agreement, and I said, "This is insufficient. Here's my agreement. These are the terms. I'm happy to use yours as a starting point or mine for a starting point, but we need to work these terms into it." And then we've always been able to come to resolution. But it is I mean, I did say be flexible. There have been cases where we started from mine and modified it to meet their needs, or started from theirs and modified it to meet my needs. I think the most important thing is have an agreement that you both have thought about and talked about all those terms.
I have to say that it's a switch off what you're talking about. It probably will make a lot of people thinking, do I really want to lend stuff? In my case, I think it would. I'd rather not bother.
And I think you should think about that. I mean, you should think about, do I really want to lend stuff? And you might decide, and the answer very well might be, yes, I do, and I don't want to go through this bother, and I'm willing to take the risk that my work will be trashed, or that I'll end up paying for something I didn't plan on. And you can make that choice. But it's better to make an informed choice than to have it dropped on you unexpectedly.
I think it's mostly based on two things. That one is how valued is your work in the eyes of the museum, and how much you value your own work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most of us will not have the biggest museum consider us to be the greatest artist of origami, and go all the way to make a very nice loan agreement. And because when my first exhibition, I think there was nobody to talk about the loan agreement. Yeah, it was very near my city, and I think most of us will meet the very simple places, and they don't even think about this kind of. And we don't really believe that our work is so important to be kept under those agreements to make sure that everything is okay. We don't value enough the work, and I think what you are trying to say to us is that is very important. That first, it's highly valuable, and it's as valuable as you see.
Yeah, I do think we need to respect our own work sufficiently, because what that agreement is doing is as asking them to respect the work. But the other thing is, even if they're small, they've never done it before, you are educating them in how to carry on a professional relationship as well. So when you behave professionally, you're helping them to behave professionally.
It's a program of relationship, not of works. It is relationship is the most important than works.
Yeah. Yes.
How might or how have you theoretically handled the situation where they say the museum really loved this exhibition, they want to hang on to your pieces and send us in a traveling exhibition. We don't know when, we don't know how long, we don't know where. We're not going to have any curatorial influence, but we want to hang on to your stuff. How would or how have you handled that?
So it's funny that those words sound really familiar. And so I'll tell you how I have handled it, which is to say that you can amend our existing agreement to allow you to hold on to it for a given time. Before it goes on to any other venue, we need to have a signed agreement. And you need to, I'm not as blunt as this, but you need to behave like a professional museum if you're going to act like a professional museum.
That's the perfect way
Okay, yeah, last question.
Is any source of the prices of origami was available, or if we didn't sell yet anything, should we guess, or may we use any available prices?
The rule of thumb, well, yeah, people often ask, how do I price my work? And the rule of thumb I used when I was starting out, and I didn't have a basis, was I said, what is my time worth? What is my hourly rate? And because I came from a professional background, my hourly rate was that of a professional, not of a starving artist. What is my hourly rate, and how long do I think it will take? And then I apply the Garibi rule for pricing, which is once you've figured out your price, double it and add 10%. You double it because you still underpriced it, and you add 10% because it gives you room to haggle. I love that.
My question is rather different because
Oh.
when we put some prices on the list, they ask us for some background for this. So how can we deliver background for the museum that the prices are correct?
I don't think you need to. I think you say, if this is my sale price, and that's all they need to know. Okay, and on that hard-nosed note, thank you again.